Hello everyone, I'm Holly Trantham, TFD's creative director, and I am coming to you with this vlog style video because I am about to go on maternity leave and I do not feel like doing a whole big fancy recording session because I'm tired. But I have some thoughts I've been wanting to share because I don't know if you've seen this TikTok going around. I'll just share a screenshot of it here. But basically there was this young woman who is a teacher who made a, I guess, funny video showing off the lunch her husband made her one day when she forgot to pack a lunch and bring it to school. And it consisted of just like every possible half to 3/4 of the way eaten snack bag in their home, one apple, and then like a leftover Chipotle order and a literal Ziploc bag of dog food, which was obviously a joke, but you know, at whose expense? I am not convinced that this wasn't posted as rage bait. I'm also not convinced that these two people have an absolutely terrible marriage or anything like that. But it's just gotten me thinking a lot because I'm currently preparing to go on maternity leave. And getting to this part of my life where I wanted to be a parent was not a foregone conclusion. There was a lot of time spent deciding whether I wanted this path for myself. And watching that TikTok made me remember like the biggest reason, which is that I have a great partner that I wanted to do this with. And, you know, here at TFD, we often call this the adult toddler husband trope. So men like this man who threw together this really sad lunch for his wife, either purely to be funny, I guess, or from a place of just weaponized incompetence. Essentially, so many husbands end up being just another toddler that a mother has to take care of. There's research that we can point to that shows that women do less housework after they get divorced because finally their husband, ex-husband, has to actually go fend for themselves and like do some of the child rearing and actually has responsibility some of the time, and she gets a break. Whereas if you have an unequal partner and an adult toddler husband who you are taking care of yourself, that ultimately means for many women and wives and mothers, they end up doing so much more of the housework and resenting it over time. And I've been writing a lot lately. This series on our newsletter I'm calling The Good Husband Guide. It's going to come out over the course of my maternity leave because I would not be choosing this journey without a spouse who I was very confident was going to be an equal partner to me as a parent, if not like the default parent instead of me. And part of the series is also talking about how we're changing our finances going into parenthood, how I knew my husband and I had the same financial and, you know, practical priorities going into this. So I'll definitely link it below. Definitely check it out. I'm also linking down below to all of our most recommended financial partners. One thing my husband and I did do recently was switch our budgeting system over from the spreadsheets we used for years to using the Monarch app. Monarch is one of TFD's partners. It's definitely also the best Mint replacement from what I've heard a lot of people. And it has really made it a lot easier to keep track of our spending in this kind of volatile time. I don't know if I'll ever go back, honestly. I really like the dashboard, how everything syncs up. It also, I'm a big sinking funds person, and it actually has a rollover feature, so it's easier to track those than I have found in other budgeting apps, which is really great for me personally. And you know, now that we're having a baby, we do have like even more goals than we had before because we're opening a 529. We had to save up and pay for getting our estate set up finally, which was something we'd been putting off for years. So I definitely highly recommend Monarch. It has saved me just so much time and energy in these last few months of pregnancy, and I definitely can't believe I didn't switch to a similar kind of app earlier in my life. Definitely go check that out below, and all of our most recommended partners that we would not ever recommend if we didn't personally stand behind them. But anyway, back to adult toddler husbands. I just wanted to make this video very casually listing out all of the reasons that I knew my husband was going to be a good partner and a good co-parent, and specifically that he would not assume I would take on all of the parenting responsibilities. And this is a very objective list, okay? Some of these are very personal preferences to me. If you have a boyfriend who you're currently debating whether or not he's the kind of partner you see yourself with long term, grain of salt for all of this. This is just like my personal observations about why I knew my husband was going to be a great dad and someone that I would want to parent with. And I don't even think that necessarily that I'm saying that this guy is an adult toddler husband. It's just like, it just, you know, tweaked something in the back of my mind and has just made me think about, you know, all the lunches my husband has made for me that have been great. All right, number one. When we first started dating, he had art on his walls and family photos up. Now, was it my taste? Absolutely not. Two of those things were different paintings of dogs playing poker that he inherited from his grandfather and different color schemes. But I realized like after we started dating for a little bit why that was attractive to me. And the reason wasn't because he had perfect taste, because he didn't. I'm sorry, can we trust a man with perfect taste? I don't know. Can we? But I did realize it was important to me that my future husband did not view home as just like a dumping ground for dirty laundry and a place to dash your weed pen. Number 2, he also kept his home pretty tidy and pretty clean. It wasn't perfect. Nothing about that apartment was perfect. In fact, the apartment itself was actually pretty bleak. It was a studio alcove in Hell's Kitchen, and you literally entered in the bedroom alcove area and then had to like kind of go around a hall into the living room area. People make do with studios here in New York City. I'm not saying that they don't. The bedding could have used a little work though. We'll just put it that way. Maybe more than 2 pillows, and also the cat litter box placement right there by the door entrance. Maybe that could have been thought out a little bit more. But all told, his space was tidy. It was clean. He cleaned up after his cat, which is not like a given for a lot of people. It meant I wasn't going to have to establish like what is an acceptable baseline of cleanliness from this man. In fact, now I would say I'm a pretty neat person, but he was tidier than me, which was honestly attractive. Number 3, he went to all of his regular annual physicals and dentist appointments without needing to be reminded. He also had a cat at the time who has since passed, sadly, but we still have 2 different cats now. And he remembered to take his cat to the vet. It was never a question that he could take care of himself beyond just basic hygiene and cleanliness. He could figure out how to get on the phone and make a doctor's appointment if he needed to, and he figured out how to get himself there. And it was never anything I ever reminded him about or did for him. And there are so many jokes on social media from wives who talk about literally making appointments for their husbands, and that has never been my life. I also know that it's not going to be expected of me to do that for our kid because the cats are his responsibility. And that brings me to number 4, that he cares for those cats at all. You know, we have a very task-based system for dividing up our household chores, and cats fall under his. He is the go-to person for their vet appointments, for their dental checkups, and cats are not children. Not even close. Just already proof that he knows how to take care of something that is outside of himself. The cats also make him very routine oriented. He has a very specific checklist he does every single morning, and kids thrive off routine, and I just know that he's going to be thriving along with them. He and his little Virgo soul. She's also maybe a Virgo, so we'll see. And I know I'm focusing this video on things that he had been doing before we started this parenthood journey and before we were actively thinking about how we would operate as parents. But I have to say, like, that man has been all over the sleep training books. He has all these flagged pages in the birth partner. He's self-directed, and he was before knowing we were going to be parents. Related to our task-oriented household management system, number 5, he never expected me to take on everything household-wise when we moved in together. There were some times when I was a little bit frustrated when, you know, a little bit of an adjustment period had to happen to get him to understand the realities of mental load, and, you know, that just because we weren't necessarily doing the same amount of chores every single day didn't mean that we weren't equitably dividing what our tasks were. He listened and he adjusted his expectations and attitude accordingly. He actually does a lot more of the day-to-day chores than I do, I would say. And he doesn't complain about it because he would rather do those than have to do like the quarterly deep cleaning, which I have obviously not done since getting pregnant. That man has not made me lift a finger, nor should he. You know, after we got over those initial, you know, conversations and adjustments, he inherently understands that the bigger tasks I do, or the less frequent tasks I do, like planning out family visits and orchestrating our entire yearly, you know, household clean out, doing the bigger cleanings rather than the day-to-day tidying or laundry, meal planning when I'm not pregnant and have more energy for it. You know, he understands that those tasks are just as important to running the household as cleaning the litter box and taking out the trash and cooking, which he does do most of. That actually brings me to number 6. He has always cooked. Even before we started dating, he's always liked cooking, which again is one of those things I realized was important to me when it came to picking somebody to be a co-parent with, because it meant that our kid, who is going to be a girl, you know, regardless of their sex, would grow up in a home where it was not the default, where mom did all of the domestic stuff, mom did all of the cooking. And I like cooking too, but you know, it's never something I wanted to do every single day. And he actually does most of it now, but I do think just him having the ability and the desire to actually do it and make it interesting was really important to me. Number 7, I think, when he notices other men in his life or on TV or whatever actively practicing weaponized incompetence, he recognizes it and points it out and rolls his eyes at it, and it's not something that like I have to point out for him. It's actually become something we gossip about when one of our friends' husbands is not pulling his weight as a domestic partner, and he even gets frustrated at other men. Like, he's actively complained to me multiple times behind people's backs, of course, about certain men in my family who do not know how to properly load a dishwasher. Number 8, when we moved in together, and before before we started fully combining our finances, but definitely when we started working on combined goals, especially, I think the biggest one would have been when we were planning our wedding and saving up for the expenses that we were responsible for. And we made a spreadsheet where we kept track of all of our savings and everything. He actively changed his spending behaviors to better match up with what our combined goals were. He was certainly by no means egregiously bad with his money. He definitely contributed to his 401k. He was enrolled in his employer's healthcare plans and all the benefits he got through them. He was paying off his student loans, but he did have some unchecked spending habits, I would say. He had some credit card debt he was paying off, as well as a consolidated personal loan from that he ended up needing to take out to pay for moving costs when he moved here and didn't have the money for it. When we were working towards our first shared goal, by that time, he had figured out how to no longer have credit card debt. He had prioritized getting rid of that and moving towards maxing out his 401k, which he did before he turned 30. He refinanced his student loans so he could pay them off more quickly. And then that was ultimately, a shared goal by the time we were married, but he ended up paying them all off within 10 years after graduating, which is pretty impressive. We are a combined finances household. We have, our own separate parts of the budget, right, that the other person doesn't get any say over. But we've adjusted over time based on our shared goals and what we want our lives to look like in, 20 or 30 years, not just what he wants his life to look like. And we already have a plan in place for, shifting some of our money over to 529 and shifting more of our money into liquid savings while we have this big unknown hanging above our heads of what parenthood's actually going to be like when we have, daycare costs we're going to have to incorporate. Even before those, big imminent parenthood costs, there's never been any resentment on his side of putting our money towards our shared future. He does not go out and buy a video console and say, I can get this because it's my money. He figures out how to pay for it out of, his personal spending allocation from our budget, for sure. It's not like I have say over those things. But he doesn't see any of our money as mine versus his. This is all just my experience. People have very different ways to approach finances. But I do think, to me at least, it wouldn't make sense to go into parenthood without having a team mindset from both parents. All right, number 9, he has actively adjusted his behaviors over time based on my preferences. That does not mean he capitulates to whatever I want anytime, but it means like when he picks meals and he knows how I have been prioritizing protein over the past few years, he has adjusted how he picks what to cook based on whether or not it has an actual legitimate amount of protein in it. Again, this does not mean he's perfect. We're still working on fiber, but he genuinely tries, he genuinely pays attention. And, when we have a child, we're going to have yet another person's needs to accommodate into our plans and probably put before our needs for a lot of our plans. And I know that I'm not going to have to handhold him in order to notice what those are. And lastly, number 10, he has his own friends and his own interests that he makes time for. And he's just as respectful of the time that I make for my friends and my interests. And yes, we are an Earth sign family. We have a shared Google Calendar. That's absolutely how we function. I'm not going to have to worry about whether or not I lose my identity in motherhood. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of adjustments. There's going to be a lot of changes. Frankly, there's probably going to be things that I experience that I can't remotely predict now, and I'll come back to you guys in 6 months and tell you how that's going. But one thing I'm not going to have to worry about is whether or not I'll be able to still prioritize, my yoga classes, my climbing, my nights going to the theater with friends. I know we both take each other's lives just as seriously as we take our own, and I'm not going to have some husband out here making me shift my entire schedule around his marathon training, when he does have like Monday night Dungeons and Dragons. He'll be proactive about making sure that trade-off is fair. And on that note, he has a genuine curiosity about the world. He has hobbies and interests that he has developed as an adult. He loves learning. I love learning, but he really loves learning. And he's very excited to introduce our kid to music and the piano and languages like he likes learning. And he'll probably be that dad who puts her to sleep reading her Lord of the Rings. Like, I have absolutely no fear that all of that's going to land on me. And all of the planning and enrichment and thought out parts of parenting are not just going to be my sole responsibility. They're going to be his too. So yeah, I just wanted to join you guys for this very casual little vloggy moment about how I decided I had the right kind of partner on my side to go into this parenthood journey with my best foot forward. I hope this was useful. If it wasn't, sorry. I think I would say to anybody who was debating whether or not this journey was for them to seriously consider whether they see their partner as a conscientious person without them having to be reminded to be one all of the time. Looking at my list, I think the biggest factors in whether or not someone's going to be not just an equal parent, but an equal spouse, an equal long-term partner, is that they show initiative to actually take on things themselves. They take ownership over specific tasks. They don't resent you for, having expectations of them, and that they don't just talk about doing things, they actually do them. Good luck to any other to-be parents coming. I know we both need it.